Howdy folks, welcome back to yet another quick review. This time is over the 2024 film Transformers 1. To start, Transformers 1 is an animated science fiction action film that was directed by Josh Cooley and screenplayed by these folks here. The film was produced by a bunch of people as seen here as well, and it was distributed by Paramount Pictures. The film features an all-star cast with Chris Hemsworth playing Orion Pax, Brian Tyree Henry playing D-16, Scarlett Johansson playing Elita 1, and Keegan-Michael Key playing B-127. The film also stars Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Fishburne, and John Hamm. With all that introductory stuff out of the way, what exactly is this film all about? Well, according to IMDb's description, the film is the untold origin story of Optimus Prime and Megatron, better known as sworn enemies, but once were friends bonded like brothers who changed the fate of Cybertron forever. Basically, it's a new original story that takes place in its own continuity, which if you are a Transformers fan you should be used to by now. The film details the friendship between two robots, Orion Pax and D-16, who would one day become sworn enemies named Optimus Prime and Megatron. Along the way to ruining their friendship, the two bots will encounter a whole cast of crazy characters and get into all sorts of hijinks. From sneaking into a race to sowing the seeds to the start of a planetary civil war, Transformers 1 has all sorts of fun for the whole family. As for my thoughts on the story, I thought it was serviceable, if not a bit simple at times. It's very much your typical coming-of-age film with a shiny coat of transforming paint, and for the most part it works, but it isn't something that'll really stick in your mind for too long. A lot of the first half of the film is rather slow and plodding, and with all that time, the only developments we really get are that Orion Pax and D-16 are good friends who are on an adventure. I want to say that the second half is when things start to get interesting for the film, but at the same time, things also feel rushed. The film is only 104 minutes long, and as such it tries to do a lot, but again, it's mostly just shoved into the second half. I would have liked it if the first half were devoted more towards exploring the relationship between our two primary protagonists, as for the most part, they just fist bump each other and call each other friends. Which, hey, it works, but I feel like the audience could handle a bit more nuance being aimed at them. I know I sound nitpicky, but these sorts of details are important if you want your emotional scenes to really pay off. And I thought that while there were some very emotional and engaging bits to the whole film, they were also undercut by just how little development we had until those moments. Also, I'll just be honest and say that the attempts at comedy weren't that great in the film. They had B-127 tell the majority of the jokes in the movie, and I feel that most fell flat for me. Bad Acetron was sort of funny the first time, but repeating it 3 times in a row really gets old. Moving on, I would like to talk about the characters and voice acting. Now usually, I'm not too big on celebrities taking the roles that voice actors should have, but I can say that for this film, everyone was decent to great. I think of all the performances, my favorite was Brian Tyree Henry's portrayal of D-16/Megatron. He starts out pretty soft-spoken, but as the film goes on, there's an intensity to his voice that builds up until he has the sort of commanding tone that only Megatron can have. And I'll also say that Chris Hemsworth was actually pretty good as Orion Pax, but then his portrayal as Optimus Prime felt a bit flat. It was like he was trying to do his best Peter Cullen impression, but towards the end, it just wasn't working for me. I understand it's hard to take on a role whose voice is so iconic, but I don't know. Maybe instead of emulating a voice, they should have had Chris try to do something that was more unique to himself. But overall, he was enjoyable. Also, a special shout out goes to Steve Buscemi as Starscream. Dude was just fun in that role, and that's really all I gotta say on it. As we continue, I want to highlight the animation and art style for the film. The animation was done by the legendary studio Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM for short. I think the film looks absolutely stunning with its metallic visuals and Art Deco-inspired aesthetics. As for the Transformers' looks in the film, I'm mostly positive on them. They are very blocky and chunky, taking tons of inspiration from Transformers Generation 1, with I think a bit of war/Fall of Cybertron influence. Whatever you call it, it was very unique. It's relieving to live during a time where animated films are trying to stand out in the best possible ways. From Spider-Verse to Puss in Boots, now has been a good time for animation lovers everywhere. Finally, we have the music. The score for this film was composed by Brian Tyler, and I thought it was fantastic. There's a lot of fun synthiness to it, with a mix of orchestral and rock music to accompany it. There was also a splash of dubstep for a scene, so I guess if you like that, there you go. But yeah, it was a fantastic score. So overall, would I recommend Transformers 1? And my answer depends. I think it's a highly, competently made movie that had a ton of time and effort put into it. The voice acting is solid, the visuals are on point, and the music is great to hear. If you are a fan of the Transformers franchise, I think this film will reward you with its references and reverence for the property. At the same time, I felt that the story was also the weakest part of the film, which usually is not a good thing. I get that it's technically a children's film, but children can handle a more well-thought-out script. That isn't to say that the whole thing is mindless or anything like that, just that it feels like it's afraid to really embrace how out there it can get. Then again, this is still probably the best written Transformers film we've gotten since Bumblebee, which shows you just how low the bar is for competently written Transformers media. Basically, if you're a fan of the franchise, you'll probably enjoy the film a whole lot. I'm personally a big Transformers fan, so despite my nitpicks, I still loved it. And if you are someone who has children, I say that it's also a fine film for them to see, so take them to see it. But yeah, that's my review of Transformers 1. See it if you feel like it. It isn't doing the best at the box office right now, so it could use a bit of love. I'd hate to see another Chris Hemsworth film bomb again in the same year. Pour one out for Furiosa.